We'll come back to the actual science of positive psychology in a moment, because there actually is science behind it that's good, real science. The problem is that in most places, the way it's being practiced is in a very superficial way. We take an idea and we think, oh, I got it, just think positively. So I'm going to begin by sharing with you my favorite story on this, which comes from a very divine, enlightened master who's no longer in his body, but used to live right across the river from us. And his name was Swami Dayananji Maharaj. And he used to come here every year in our International Yoga Festival and sometimes other times during the year. He had ashrams in various places and give beautiful, beautiful discourses. And one year, he shared a story about positive thinking. And someone had asked him about whether positive thinking worked and couldn't we just think positive. And his story went like this. And you have to just picture this very elderly, enlightened, brilliant, long white bearded saint telling you the story. Because I'll give it in as close to his words as I remember. So he says, I have a friend. And my friend is very fat. And my friend has high blood pressure and diabetes and is very sick. And so my friend's doctor told him, you must stop eating fatty foods and sugary foods and you must go on a diet. And he said, one day I saw my friend and my friend was eating a donut. And I said to him, hey friend, why are you eating this donut? I thought your doctor told you no more fat, no more sugar, you have to be on a diet and take care of yourself. And my friend said, well, Swamiji, I'm practicing positive thinking. And see, there's two parts of the donut. One part is this outer circle that, yes, you are right, it is fatty and greasy and sugary. And the other part is the inner part, which is empty. And my positive thinking has taught me to focus on the empty part of the donut instead of the outer part of the donut. And that's why I'm eating a donut, because it's just empty air. So Swami Dayananji Maharaj shared the story, of course, as a brilliant and very funny, he was very, very funny, way of helping us understand the silliness of any practice that's not rooted in truth. To negate reality, to repress and suppress truth, and to live in a very, very superficial layer of reality is not beneficial on any level. Spirituality is all about freedom. So freedom from suffering. Now you don't get free from suffering by taking your freedom and by taking your suffering and locking it up into a box in your mind or heart. You get free of it by having the courage to look at it. You get free of it by moving through it. Or by sinking so deeply into the truth of who you are that the suffering just dissipates because it existed only on a very attached, superficial level. But you don't get free of it just by pretending there is no suffering. Like you do not avoid the fat grams and calories of a donut by focusing only on the center. So I'm definitely not in favor of untruth. I'm not in favor of superficial level, shallow existence. I'm not in favor of pretending that things are one way when they're another way, when our inner reality is that they are another way. That all being said, there is a lot actually of evidence, spiritual evidence and scientific evidence, of focusing on that which is deeper than the suffering and darkness. So if you can think about it in layers of truth, topmost superficial level, if I'm doing this positive thinking thing, topmost superficial level, I'm great, everything's wonderful, no problem, no. Yes, my brother, sister just died, no problem, here I am on the superficial level of existence. Go a step deeper. I'm really suffering. I'm really in pain. I'm really in pain that my brother or sister or loved one just passed away. I'm really in pain from whatever it is that's causing me suffering. But go a step deeper. And actually what you find is a place of joy and peace that's not the superficial level I've ignored the suffering or I've pushed it away, but it's a deeper level of I've dropped into a truth that even though this has happened, I am able to experience joy. That's different than the just change the way that I talk. But it also exists. So yes, there is light and there is shadow, and there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful teachings about looking at the shadow. But there's also a place in which there is no shadow. And that's in the place of soul, the place of consciousness, the place of spirit. So we have to deal with our shadow as long as we are pushing it away, because then it's just going to come back and bite me in some other way, some very unawake, unskillful way of moving in the world. I'm going to be bit by my shadow. But if I'm able to drop into a place of awareness, there's a place that is light with no shadow. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with our shadow in our day-to-day life. One may be a place that we are able to touch in our meditation. But as we move through our world, yeah, we've got to look at our own shadows. You can't just band-aid it over. Absolutely. There's no one I know who represses, suppresses, denies, who actually gets anywhere. However, lastly, coming back to the actual science of positive psychology, there really actually is some very, very good science here, but what it says is different. It's not talking about repression or suppression or denial. What the science says is people who are optimists, in general, are happier and healthier than people who are pessimists. Now, interestingly, they are wrong more frequently. So actually, people who are pessimists are correct more frequently. They actually get what's going to happen more right more frequently than optimists. So it's a trade-off. Those of us who are optimists tend to be happier and healthier. We also tend perhaps not to be the people you want to hire as your money investors. You may be much better off investing with a pessimist who may not, make you feel warm and fuzzy, but might actually do a better job of predicting the markets. You might want to buy insurance from a pessimist rather than an optimist. But there are ways, because ultimately, in life, at least in most cases, it bodes better for us to be happy and healthy than to be right. And so there are ways that can be taught to raise your general level of living. What they find is that most of us have a particular level upon which we live of happiness, of general happiness. And that if you study people for long enough, you can pretty much tell people where their line is. But there are ways to increase your line. Not temporarily. We know things increase it temporarily, things decrease it temporarily, but there are ways to gently and ever so slightly increase your baseline. And that's what the School of Positive Psychology is about. It's not about repression, suppression, denial, sugarcoating. It's actually about science of A, optimists and pessimists, B, how to take people who may be right but are miserable and help them raise their baseline of happiness in life. And a lot of that science works. So I wouldn't throw that science into the same basket as the people who have simply co-opted terms like positive thinking out of a real science and are practicing it with no science. So don't put the two of them in the same bucket. But that science does actually have a lot of really valid and very, very helpful tools of how to raise your baseline. Even if you're an optimist, we could always use a little bit of baseline raising. Why not? But without disregarding our deepest truth. So we may disregard that it's going to rain on our picnic, but we sink into a much, much deeper level of truth. And that's the spiritual component about it that they don't talk about, is that there is that place beneath the suffering. But we need spirituality rather than just scientific tools to get there.